Okay, so you go into your storyboards and you press the little plus sign to pull up your library. And what we want to do is add a table view to this view controller. And so I'm going to drag it out, and now I have a table view. And we haven't talked about how to make these things full screen yet, but for now, just drag them around until they fill the screen. Okay, so here's my table view. Now, how tables are going to work in iOS is tables have what's called a prototype cell. Each little element in our table, so this drawing on the whiteboard here, each one of these is a cell. And the cell gets repeated. And as it gets repeated, you put stuff in it as it goes. Okay? So we need to have a prototype cell, a sample of what every other cell is going to look like. And you can have more than one prototype cell. So you could have a table that has, sometimes they're yellow and sometimes they're green. That's fine, but you need at least one prototype cell that's going to be the one that gets copied all the way down in the table. You with me so far? Cool. Okay. So to make a prototype cell, by default it doesn't have one. You want to go to this little dial-y thing over here. Well, first make sure that you have the table selected. Then you go to this little dial-y thing over here. And see where it says prototype cells? Crank that up to the total number that you want. The default's going to be 1. So we have 1 prototype cell. While you're at it, make sure that says dynamic properties above it right here, which means that it can be controlled by Swift. Sound good? Questions about that so far? So we now have 1 prototype cell. Then I'm going to go over to the little, gosh, I cannot see this very well. That's better. Let me find which one it's in. Give me a second. Oh, in here, once I hit prototype cells, it makes a prototype cell right there. And so you want to expand this over here on the left and just select just that cell. So now I've only selected that cell. I'm not selecting the entire table. I just have that cell. And you want to change the style up here for now from custom to basic. Basic just means it's going to have 1 text label inside of each cell. And so you can see it has the word title right here, just magically appeared. That's a little text box that I can reference in Swift later. Also, because I can conceivably have more than 1 prototype cell, I need to give this prototype an identifier, a way of saying I want to use that one. So right here underneath identifier, give it a name. And you can give it any name. I like to use just my cell for my prototype cell. But it doesn't matter. Just know you'll memorize what that is, because you're going to need it in a second. Okie dokie? Yeah.
When you name it, are you only naming that first one or both?
You're naming the prototype. So it's a good analog to prototypes is structs. They don't actually, by making it, they don't even show up. You're just simply saying, I'm going to make a copy of that eventually. And so you're giving it the name of what the struct will be called. Yeah, Morgan.
I can see like font. If I have a flag, I can see font.
Yeah. So then you need to get each one its own unique. Yeah. For us, for right now, just stick with the these two. Lauren. Yeah. So these panels can be shown or hidden. So just kind of get them open, and then you can choose the stuff you want over here on the left-hand side. You can also just click on it, but it's really easy to accidentally click on the table when you're meaning the prototype and blah, 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 blah. So just be careful about that. You'll know that you got the wrong thing because you won't have the right options on the right-hand side. So anyway, so what I've done so far is I've drug a table view out of the library. I've made it pretty big. In the table view, I've cranked up prototype cells from 0 to 1. I've made sure that the content is set to dynamic properties. And on the prototype cell that I generated, I made sure the style is set to basic and the identifier is set to my cell. But you can set that identifier to anything you want. Just remember what you're setting it to. Sound good? Inside of this here, if you wanted to, you could also monkey around with other things that you'd want your table to look like. So you can change its color and all that kind of stuff over here on the right-hand side as well. But we'll get to all that more later. We good? Okay, now what we need to do is connect our storyboard to our Swift code. And if you'll recall, that's not that hard. I just hit this little plus button here. Just give us some more real estate to work with. And look at the viewcontroller.swift file, which is the code below the controls, the storyboard. So now on the left-hand side here, I have my storyboard that has my table view on it, and I have the Swift code that controls that view controller. On my storyboard, I'm going to select the entire table view. I am not on the cell. I have the entire table view selected. I know that because I got handles around the entire cell instead of just around the entire table instead of just the cell. And on the left-hand side here, it highlights the table view, not the individual cell. Next, I'm going to control drag the rubber band off of the one on the left over to the right. And I'm going to connect as an outlet in the same way that we did with labels. We're going to connect as an outlet a table. And it works exactly like it did for labels. I just need to give it a name. So I'm going to give this a name. I'll call it my table. My table view. Connect. And that's the only thing I need to do between these two. So I'm going to go ahead and hide this so I get more room. And so now this view controller has inside of it a connection to a table view, which is my table view. You see up in line 10 where it says class view controller : UI view controller? Do you see that? That purple? That word in purple? That word in purple is purple because UI view controller means something to Swift. It means this is code that can control a view controller. However, my normal view controller isn't just a view controller anymore. It now can control a table. So it needs to get extra superpowers added to it. And so to do that, I can say it's not just a UI view controller. It is also a UI table view delegate and a UI table view data source. Where's it at? Right there. And you can see these are comma separated. So this is saying it's both. It's not just a UI table view anymore. It is also, or it's not just a UI view controller, it is also a UI table view delegate and the UI table view data source. Okay? This looks confusing, but it makes sense when you take it out of the context of code and think about it like a person. So I am a human, so and you're all humans, and we all have that default set of what it means to be human, right? That means we all have arms and legs that are certain between 0 and 2 each. We all have eyes that are between 0 and 2 each. We all have ears that are 0 and 2 each. We all know how to do certain things like breathe and our heartbeat and digest and all that kind of stuff. But then some of you have special powers that are connected to you. So you might be a son, or you might be a daughter, or you might be a boyfriend, or you might be a girlfriend, or you might be a spouse, or you might be a best friend, or you might be a member of this or a member of that. Or you might have certain skills. You might be a barista, so you know how to make good coffee, all that kind of stuff. Those would just be comma things up here. And so you have, if you're a barista, you now know how to work that crazy machine that's in the coffee shop that normals like me don't know how to work. But at the same time, you're still human. You didn't change your humanness. You've now added barista to your stack of things that you are. You with me? Same thing here. This is saying that this view controller is no longer just a UI view controller. It is also a UI table view delegate and a UI table view data source. Just like a barista is a human and knows how to work the crazy machine. Good? Okay. You'll see it throws an error message when I do that, which is awesome because it used to not do this and you used to have to memorize this and it sucked. Okay? Because it's what I'm about to do. It's going to generate so much code, and you used to have to memorize this and like type it exactly right every single time, and it was awful. Okay, but now it gives it to you for free. What it's saying is, hold on there, buddy. You said that you're a UI table view delegate and a UI table view source. However, you're not doing anything with those superpowers. So it's in the same way, if I were to say, hey, Morgan is now a barista, but I never use Morgan's barista powers, okay? Or Morgan never learned how to use the crazy machine. And so that doesn't jive. The definition of a barista is someone who can use the crazy machine. Are you with me? So this is saying, hey, you don't have the stuff that tells me what a UI TableView delegate and a UI TableView data source is going to do. And this is where you're going to be so happy that you live in the future. Because if I hit this little stop sign and hit fixed, it adds those superpowers automatically. And you used to have to manually type these things, and it was miserable. And you had to memorize this, and you type it 1,000 times, and you forget the comma, and it was the worst, okay? So what this has done is it's generated 2 functions that are TableView related functions. And you can think of this as, hey, saying, hey, Connor is now a barista, so that means he knows how to steam milk, and he knows how to press an espresso through the machine, or tamp it down with the little doodad, right? This is saying the same thing. Hey, there's 2 special things that all tables know how to do, and these are them. Now, there are other things that tables can know how to do, but these are the bare minimum. In the same way that the bare minimum to know how to be a barista is to steam the milk and tamp the stuff down. Okay, there might be other things that some of them know, but those are just the ones that really, really matter. Same thing here, all tables have to have these 2 things. Cool? Okay, let's talk about what these 2 things are. The first is, if I'm making a list of things and I'm going to draw them on the screen, I need to know how many things you're going to be making. Are you going to make 5, or 2, or 1, or a million? All that kind of stuff. And so that's what this first function that starts on line 12 is asking. And you can tell because it says number of rows and sections. And so what it's saying is, hey, we're going to make a table, and there's a lot of rows in there. How many of those are we going to make? Some thumbs up so far? Okay, great. To make this function spit out an answer, spitting out an answer out of a function is called returning. You might remember that from 322. Inside of here where it says code, I just need to put the code that returns the number of rows I want. So for now, I'm just going to say 5. We'll just say there's 5 things in this table. What those 5 things are, I don't know. I haven't gotten that far yet. Is it possible to have more than 5? Sure. But for now, we're just going to say there's 5 things that we're going to spit out. So what this is going to do is make a table that's just got 5 elements in it. Okay? Sound good? Great. The second thing all tables need to have is not how many rows are there, but also what goes in each row. And so that's what this next function that it generates does. Line 16. Line 16 is saying is asking the question, what's the cell for row at? You can see it right here in blue. And what this is going to do is line 16 will get ran the same number of times that I said in line 13. So I said there's 5 rows. This function will get called 5 times. If there's 600 rows, it'll get called 600 times. Because what it's going to say is, okay, great, we're on the first row. What do you want to put there? Thank you very much. We're on the second row. What do you want to put there? We're on the third row. What do you want to put there? Etc. Okay? Make sense? We good? Okay. So what this is asking for, you can see that right here, there's this little arrow on line 12. Let me put my cursor on there so you can see it in the video. There's this like little arrow that we've drawn. What that's saying is, I'm asking for you to return to me an int. And we have successfully returned an int, which is 5. You can say this one is saying, hey, what I want you to ultimately return to me is a TableView cell. So we already made one of those cells. That's our prototype. So what we're going to do is take our prototype, copy it, put some stuff in it, and then return it. And so it's like the computer's asking us, great, I'm on row 0. What do you want in row 0? And you say, well, I want a cell in row 0. And let me assemble the cell for you and give it back to you. And it says, great, we're on row 1. What do you want in row 1? Well, I want a cell in row 1. Let me assemble the cell for you and give it back to you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all the way through to the total number of times that line 13 tells us it wants it. Good so far? Questions? Let's do thumb jury. Okay. If you're not up, how can I make you go north? What questions do you have? Or are we good? You just need to see it. Just need to see it? Okay, great. So let's go ahead and build a cell. So I'm going to create a brand new variable called myCell. Oh, wait, we used that name over in the prototype. We'll call it cell. You can make a variable called anything. And remember, variables can be named anything, and you can stick an infinite number of things inside of cells. So we've already, or inside of variables rather. So we've looked at how you can put strings in them, you can put ints in there, you can put structs in them, but you can also put in Swift's pre-built structs, which are a cell. So what we're going to do is put a cell into this, an empty cell into this variable. And how we're going to do that is say, hey, I want you to go into the table view that I've made a connection to and make a copy of that prototype. So go into my table view. And, oh wow, it's so smart that it even knows which one I want. And DQ a reusable cell, which means make a copy of a reusable cell. And then the obvious question is, well, which one should I make a copy of? And the answer is whatever you named it over in the storyboard. Remember when you typed in identifier? You can see now the Swift code is asking for, well, what's the identifier that I'm supposed to look for? And so you can put anything in there, but it has to be the same thing you put in the storyboard. So for me, I'm going to say myCell. To be super clear how this is working is, I know. In the storyboard, I have my table view, which I command drug over. It's right there. And so I'm going into this table view that I've command drug over and looking through it for a prototype cell. That's what DQ means. So DQ reusable cell is looking for a prototype cell. And it needs to know which one to get. And so the one, whatever I name this right here is the one that it's going to go get. And so over here in the code, DQ a reusable cell is going to look for a specific identifier, and that's the same thing. This is so easy to screw up that usually when I'm demoing this in class, I'll literally copy this to my clipboard and go back and paste it just to make sure I didn't have a typo. Okay? And so we've now said, okay, great. I made a copy of a reusable cell. It's right here. I got it. I've named it cell. And at this point, we would change that cell and do something to it, like put the name of the comic book into it or change the art for the comic book that we're going to show. But for now, we're just going to leave it how it is. I got it right here. And we're going to return it just like it is. So we're just going to make a copy of the prototype and return it. So I'm just going to say return cell. And so this should work, is that it's looking for a UI table view cell. I've made one using this, and I'm returning it. And what this is saying is, hey, are you sure you got that cell? And I'm going to say, yep, I promise. Don't worry with that. I'll explain what that exclamation point means later. Just know you need to have it at the end. And so now we're returning a cell. So to walk you through this one more time, I think I saw Margaret raise her hand, so I want to make sure, I'll come back to you, but I'm going to walk you through this one more time. First, what I'm doing is I'm command dragging over from storyboard to make this outlet. I'm remembering the name of the outlet that I gave it. So my table view is what I called it today. You could call yours marshmallow. I don't care. It could be anything you want. Then I'm saying, hey, this is no longer just a UI table view. It's a UI table view controller. It's also a UI table view delegate and a UI table view source. And Swift says, wah wah. You said if you say that you are those things, you need to know how. You need to tell me the answer to these two questions, and it spits out these two functions that are what you need to answer when you hit fix. And the first thing it's asking is, how many rows am I making? And you tell it, return 5. And the next thing it says, what do you want to do in each one of those rows? And what I'm saying is, make a variable called cell, go into my table view, which is this connection you made, look through it for a reusable cell, which is a prototype, and specifically look for the one that has the same identifier that I have typed into here. And then once you made a copy of that, return it. So right now, all this is gonna say is title, 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 because the prototype says title. But in a minute, we're gonna change what title says to something else. Yeah, Morgan, so much.
So I understand everything up until the last line we just did with the reusable cell with identifier.
Yeah.
So is that just copying it over and over again?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly right, yeah. So it's just saying like, hey, you have a prototype in that table view. Which one do you want to use as the foundation for building this row? Okay. And we only got one in there right now, but you can in theory have an infinite number of prototype cells. And so like let's say you wanted one row to look one way and another row to look another way, and then those are common things. Like sometimes they're red and sometimes they're green. Those would just be two different prototype cells that you set up over in a storyboard. And you say, if it's this, then get the green one, it's that, then get the red one. Which we'll get to later. But that's why you gotta tell it which one to get, because it doesn't know which one. And how you tell it which one to get is what you type in as the identifier. Does that answer your question? Great. Yeah.
What does the return mean again?
Return
What's
just
the
means
difference?
give back to me, right? So if I were to, again, let's go back to like real life. Let's say you work at Starbucks, and I come up to you and say, I want a orange mocha frappuccino, okay? And you'd say, great, da 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 da. Here's your orange mocha frappuccino. That you're returning the orange mocha frappuccino to me. And if you gave me an egg bite, then that would not work because that's not what I asked for, right? And so right here, this function is asking for a UI table view, and so I'm giving it a UI table view. Or UI table view cell rather. I'm giving it a UI table view cell. So it's happy. Good so far? Okay, there's only one more thing we have to do and then we can hit build and we'll see our very first table. And that is, yes, I have said this table view can control, or this big thing here, I've told it I can control tables because I said this and this. And I've drug one table over this one. But it is possible to have more than one table view in a view controller. So you never see this because it's really bad user interface, but you can have a table that you can scroll at the top of your phone and another table that you can scroll at the bottom of your phone. You can have more than one. Not a good idea, but it's possible. So we have yet to say which of those two tables are we modifying. And so in the viewed load, we have to add one more thing. We have to say that my table view dot delegate is self, and my table view dot data source is self. If you care to know what exactly that means, I'll do my best to explain it right now. What this is just simply saying is, hey, this view controller, this, which is self because it's inside of it, can control this table view's, a delegate is just like a delegate of France to the United States. It's someone that can negotiate on the behalf of France. So this is saying, hey, who negotiates for this table view? Self. This thing that we're in can negotiate for this table view. And where is this table view getting its information, its data source? Also self. So this allows us to control a table view and put stuff into the table view. Okay? Make sense? Awesome. Now if I build it, I'll have our very first table, which is going to be awesome. You'll note that it took a little longer than normal for that to build because this stuff is a little more complex. As long as I don't change the code up on the screen, it'll build lickety-split as I go. So kind of the building stuff gets faster as you go. And it's going to take a while because it's got to launch the simulator. It's also going to be a little slower because I'm recording this. For some reason, Xcode and the simulator both run crazy slow when you're doing a screen recording. There we go. And give me a second. It should say It might be working just not on the projector. Give me a second. Come on. There we go. Sorry, it took a second for the app to load. And so it says title, and it says it 5 times. Why 5 times? Because I told it so. In line 18, why did it say title? Because the prototype says title. Now before we get into modifying those cells so they actually are useful and say something different, does this make sense? Good? Okay, I'm going to stop the recording so it doesn't get slow.